Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast. In this episode, my weird dad will be talking about...
In this hospital, your next visit may be your last.
All visitors, please leave. Don't do
Visiting hours so frightening you may never recover. Rated R.
Hello, and welcome back to Wake Up Heavy Recollections of Horror. This is Mark Bagley, your host, and we are starting a new volume of Why Didn't I Rent This? This is Volume 4, Episode 1 on the 1982 Canucksploitation film Visiting Hours. And I wanted to do something a little bit different today other than reading a review from the Psychotronic Encyclopedia film or one of the other old video books that I have. Instead, I'm going to read some reviews, contemporary reviews of the film. Vincent Canby, noted film critic of the New York Times, called the film an especially clumsy, overwrought example of slash and hack melodrama. The laughs here are not intentional. The review in Variety stated, though artless, is terror-crammed and bloody enough to appeal to the raunchy circuit trade. Gene Siskel, who, along with Roger Ebert, were noted anti-slasher and horror picture critics, gave it half a star out of 4 and called it yet another depressing, sicky with knife-chasing women picture. He was surprised that Lee Grant and William Shatner were in the film and asked, do these people really need a paycheck that badly? The LA Times wrote, just another sickening, numbskull movie that hypocritically exploits extreme violence against women while purportedly protesting it. Tom Shales of the Washington Post stated, you're not just sorry you came to a movie like this, you feel saddened and troubled that it even exists, that somebody saw a few more quick bucks in such a tired, ritualized, and malicious formula. Jeff Brown of the Monthly Film Bulletin called it a lamentable shocker and stated that the writer and director were charging like bulls through a script ridden with implausibilities. Now, I don't give much credence to film reviews in general, and most definitely not when discussing horror movies. And a lot of this is happening these days as well, especially with the proliferation of social media as well as this idea that certain films aren't made for certain people. I see this a lot. This film wasn't made for you. And a lot of times that you is old white men, and that's fine. But an audience member, critic or not, should be able to get something out of any movie. It shouldn't matter who or what you are. But this happens with, especially back then, with film critics and not really wanting to appear like they took this stuff seriously. And I think a lot of that negativity was especially put forth by Siskel and Ebert on their show, which I used to watch all the time. There could be a holier-than-thou aspect of their reviews on horror films and especially slasher films. Not that I consider Visiting Hours a slasher per se, but I am not surprised by these negative reviews. I happen to really, really like this movie, and on my second watch, or my second rewatch yesterday, I thought, damn, this is one of the better 1982 horror films, and there were a lot in 1982. And I thought to myself, damn, I should have put this on my top 10 slasher list. And it had been a while since I had watched it. Then I thought, well, is it a slasher, though? It might meet those requirements that I've mentioned, especially during that sub-series of things and the link that I have to Paste Magazine that defines it. But it's more of a woman in peril or almost home invasion. There are a number of scenes that take place in the protagonist's home, actually a couple different homes of different characters. And then there is a lot of stalking in a hospital. So real quick summary of the film. Lee Grant plays Deborah Ballin, who is a feminist activist who inspires the wrath of Colt Hawker, a misogynistic serial killer. After appearing on a TV show, Deborah is attacked in her house by Colt and sent to County General Hospital. While in the hospital, Deborah befriends a nurse named Sheila, who is inspired by Deborah's activism and ideals. Hawker, played by Michael Ironside, goes to the hospital to finish the job, but instead kills an elderly woman and a nurse. He hears Sheila disparaging him and turns his attention to her.
She suffered an awful lot after what that bastard did to her. Oh, God knows. But whoever did ought to be caged and fed raw meat.
So a lot of the movie is Colt stalking one or both of these women. And I will say that it does become a bit repetitive. That is my one beef with the film. He goes back to the hospital 3 or 4 times and is thwarted each time. He stalks Deborah at her home at the opening of the movie, which is actually a very tense and effective scene where she comes home, things are out of place. She had asked her housekeeper to clean up the mess. It's still there. There's an open window. And there's an interesting thing that they did with the background sound. Everything is quiet except for one isolated sound, like her footsteps or a window banging or a faucet running, and that sound is amplified. And it gives it this really creepy, eerie feeling. And this is repeated later on in a stalking scene of Sheila at her house. And again, it's effective, but at this time I'm thinking, okay, we did this scene once. Why are we doing it again? And then all of the different times that Hawker goes back to the hospital again and again. So as I was watching it this time, I was thinking, boy, this is a lot like Halloween 2 with these scenes in the hospital, although it's not nearly as vacant as the hospital in Halloween 2. And then I also thought, this is reminding me of something else, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it until this morning, but it gives me the same kind of vibe as 10 to Midnight, the Charles Bronson movie directed by J. Lee Thompson, which I briefly mentioned in the Happy Birthday to Me episode. and how it's got this kind of sleazy undertone, especially with the psychopathic killer played by Michael Ironside. At one point, he is wearing a pleather or leather black tank top, and he's constantly sweaty and his hair is greased back, and the scene that he's wearing this in is pretty rough as it is, so it just has that kind of sleazy vibe that 10 to Midnight has. But what I like about the movie is that it does at least attempt to go a little bit deeper, and we have the feminist angle that isn't necessarily realized perfectly. I think the character of Deborah Ballin still comes off in that stereotypical ball buster way, and we still have some hysterics and, of course, all the gaslighting with William Shatner, who plays her boss. He's constantly telling her what she's thinking isn't what's happening, when, of course, it is. But we also, again, have older people as the victims. We have professionals. We have very intelligent people as opposed to our dumb teenagers who just want to screw. Plus, we don't have just a nameless, faceless killer. We get into the head of Colt Hawker, played by Michael Ironside. We get a lot of backstory. We see his childhood in flashbacks, and there is the implication of sexual abuse by his father, or at the very least, physical abuse, and abuse of his mother, who eventually fights back and throws a pot of boiling oil on his dad and disfigures him. And we see Colt taking care of his father at the nursing home throughout the film. An idea is presented regarding repressed hostility and how that instills violence.
Repressed hostility is often expressed in covert prejudice or overt violence. Or both? Yes.
He has framed letters all over his apartment, and when he brings Lisa home, played by Lenore Zann, she reads a bit of them, and we finally kind of realize what they are, and this informs his character and why he is after Lee Grant's character.
Christ, you really blast them all, don't you? Blacks, Jews, Mexicans. You want the whole goddamn world to yourself?
Yeah.
So he is that angry white male who feels that the world has done him wrong, and he takes it out on women. And not just any women, but strong women, which is related to this incident with his mother and father when he was a child.
Why is he after me?
Because you're a strong woman. You're independent. Capable of making decisions that sway public opinion. You make a lot of people angry, Dad.
What did I say? What did I say? What did I do?
It's the Janet Macklin thing. That's why the big push. He doesn't want you to make that second interview.
Why doesn't he go after her?
Because you're telling America that she's right, and you're telling your sick mind that he's wrong. You're the focus, not her.
And we get this notion of the obsessed fan and the celebrity stalker before that was really well known or in the public eye. This was before the murders of Rebecca Schaefer or Selena, and although these things had been going on, it wasn't really well known by people outside of the industry. When is a why didn't I rent this movie not really a why didn't I rent this movie? Well, when you slowly begin to realize you've actually seen the dang movie before, even though I am including this movie in that sub-series, I actually rented this when I was younger, but the first time I quote-unquote rewatched it a couple of years ago, I didn't realize that until about halfway through the film, and that is in the scene where Hawker picks up Lisa and takes her back to his apartment. The whole deal with the leather tank top started the wheels turning in my head, but his attack on her gave me a strong sense of déjà vu. I still didn't really think that I had seen it, but it was firing some memory receptors. And later on, he's shown squeezing a rubber ball, which he later uses to stuff in someone's mouth. And again, I was like, boy, this is awfully, awfully familiar to me. But it wasn't until the third act of the film where I said, oh, yes, I have seen this movie. And it involves this kind of convoluted and maybe not very logical way that Hawker gets himself back to the hospital. At this point, it's finally been discovered that he is the one that is stalking her, and I won't get into all the particulars of that. It involves Sheila, the nurse. It involves Lisa, the girl that Colt Hawker attacked. And of course, it involves Deborah. And it all converges into finally everyone believing her that she is being attacked by this guy. And so he hatches a plan to get himself back to the hospital, and he basically smashes an empty beer bottle into his arm and pulls it up, and it's actually a pretty good special effects scene. And that image of him pulling his arm up with all this embedded glass and drops of blood stuck in my head. For the longest time, I don't think I realized what that was from. I just knew it was Michael Ironside whenever I would see him in other movies. I just had no recollection of seeing this, and it strikes me as odd because I grew up watching Star Trek when it was in syndication, and I honestly don't remember watching a horror movie with William Shatner in it. Maybe it's because he doesn't quite look like Captain Kirk in this, but I would think that I wasn't too far removed from Star Trek to where I would at least have recognized him. So I'm a little perplexed as to why I had no recollection of the film when I rewatched it for the first time. And like I mentioned on the Happy Birthday to Me episode, that doesn't really happen. What does happen a lot of times is not remembering the title to a film. That happened with the Frankenstein Created Woman deal when I was growing up, but boy, not remember watching a film at all is unusual, to say the least. As I mentioned in the opening of the episode, this is a Canadian production, a quote-unquote Canuxploitation film. The director, Jean-Claude Lord, worked mainly in Canadian television. The producers were responsible for a number of early David Cronenberg films, and we get some more connections to some of the films I've already talked about. Lenore Zahn was in Happy Birthday to Me, and she's in a film called Murder by Phone, and I remember the VHS box for this, but I have yet to see it. I haven't tracked it down yet. In a bit role as a patient in the hospital, we have Harvey Atkin, who was Mort from Meatballs.
Are you ready for the summer?
Apparently, Neil Affleck, who played the killer in My Bloody Valentine, plays a cop in this, but I totally missed him. Linda Pearl plays Sheila, and she has worked mainly in television, and I didn't remember this, but she had a recurring role on Happy Days for I think around 30 episodes. She was also on Matlock as Matlock's daughter, if I'm not mistaken. That is not a show that I watched at all in my younger days. And she has thrice been on Murder, She Wrote. Michael Ironside is a horror movie staple and was in one of my favorite David Cronenberg films, Scanners. We all know William Shatner as Captain Kirk, but he has been in a couple of horror-related projects, including The Devil's Reign and some spooky episodes of The Twilight Zone. Lee Grant's horror creds include the TV movie The Spell, and something that I have been trying to track down for a while now, The Mafu Cage with Carol Kane, that is just supposed to be absolutely bananas. She was in Damien, Omen 2, The Swarm, and David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Okay, upcoming for the show, I need to close out the Why Do I Hate Slashers I Don't Actually series on The Burning, which I hope to get to quickly here. I want to cram December full of episodes before I take a break in January. So I do have a couple of other things planned as well. And instead of doing a year-end wrap-up, I may record an episode for January to put out while I am not actively recording as a summary of the year, but I think I'll do something a little different and mainly go through my watched movies list from 2019 and pull out those new movies that I saw this year, as well as new discoveries. So first-time watches that I really enjoyed, and maybe go through that. And then, of course, talk a little bit about the year that the show had and all that, but that won't come out until January. I do have a Christmas episode lined up. I know the movie I'm doing. So that, along with The Burning, and I think I had something else. I still need to get to the We Are Still Here appreciation episode. So 2 or 3, maybe 4 by the end of the month. And then you won't be hearing from me so much in January. For my watch list, since I didn't do one on the episode with my daughter, it's gotten fairly lengthy. And so I think since I am going to do something pretty quickly here, I will give you half of the list right now and the other half when I do The Burning. So I watched something that could have been a Why Didn't I Rent This if the movie had been more enjoyable. Night Wish from 1989, which the only good thing I can really say is there is some great special effects from K&B on there. I did a John Landis triple feature and rewatched The Blues Brothers, An American Werewolf in London, and Animal House. A lot of these are rewatches, it looks like. Again, I watched Dirty Harry, The Bride of Frankenstein, Chinatown, which I had not watched in years, one of my old-time favorites. Something new for me called The Sounds of Silence, which was forgettable because I can't even remember what it was about right now. I watched, this is a possible Why Didn't I Rent This, American Gothic from 1987. I remember seeing this video all the time at the video store, never watched it, and it was kind of fun. I rewatched Magic with Anthony Hopkins, finally watched Audition, which didn't work for me, I think, as much as it does for a lot of other people. The wife and I watched Us, which was very good. I watched a sunny neo-noir called The Late Show with Art Carney and Lily Tomlin. And then this weird flick that's on Amazon Prime right now called Successive Slidings of Pleasure. It was like an art house, kind of exploitation horror film, French, I believe. Lots of nudity, so be careful with that one. My wife and I watched The Irishman, of course, go Marty. And then something I've been trying to rewatch forever, which just showed up on Sony Crackle, Neighbors, not the Seth Rogen movie, but the one with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. And then fun, slow, trippy sci-fi from 1974 called Phase 4. So that'll do it for this entry in the watch list. I'll give you the rest and whatever I happen to watch between now and recording The Burning. Oh, and one last note, I kind of debated whether I should compile the previous volume of the Why Didn't I Rent This episodes as I had done in the past, put those 3 episodes all into one, and I thought, boy, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. Some of these are still getting plays, and especially these days with new listeners, they tend to go back and catch up, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, so that should be up around the same time as this one. And I really don't do that to garner plays from people who have already listened to those. It's just sort of to clear up the track list on SoundCloud more than anything. Plus, if you do subscribe to the show, say on Apple Podcast, if you downloaded those old episodes, you should still have them on your phone or iPad or wherever else you download. Just don't download this one, I guess. Okay, so that will go up as a compilation episode like the previous ones. And that should do it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget,
anything can happen when you wake up heavy. Ho, 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 ho.